This session will start with a tone setter on the legal implications of informed consent by Dr. Mahendra Kumar Bajpai. And now let's understand that eliminating HIV first commences with eliminating stigma and discrimination. Keeping this in mind, the recently passed bill has given a lot of sting into the entire human rights issues. But the fact that the mandatory testing or testing strategy is still not incorporated in the bill which was put up gives a scope for today's debate, which will give us an opportunity to deliberate on how, why, and what are we going to accomplish. Now, at the very outset, I'd like to ask Mr. Mahendra Kumar Bajpai to give the legal implications of informed consent, which will be the tone setter for the entire debate. You can. Dr. Mahendra Kumar, Mr. Mahendra Kumar Bajpai.
Respected dignitaries on this stage, off this stage, AIDS Society of India, organizers of this conference, and dear delegate friends. Consent is something with which I, as a person, as a student of law, have never been very comfortable. I call it a foolish law. But nevertheless, it happens to be the law of the land, and we all are bound to follow it. Foolish? Very simple reason. If the patient was so very intelligent to give consent, to know the various aspects of the treatment, doctor was not at all needed. Let me illustrate it. I am a counsel. I practice in Supreme Court. I am briefed by advocates. Advocates who have done their law, some of them are more qualified than me. My job is to appear in court and argue matters. Before going to court, invariably we discuss the matters. What are the strong points in the case? What are the shortcomings? Which are the points that have to be stressed? But once I am there in the court, it is I and only I who take a decision. And there are times when I have to simply withdraw a case. I don't even blink. I don't take a consent, not even from the advocate who is sitting beside me, to brief me. And why am I briefed? I am briefed because those split-second decisions which I take, the probability of committing mistake is minimal. I do commit mistakes. You are doctors. You have been given the authority by law to practice medicine. You have studied for a long period. Your experience goes in. The short question is, will a patient, he may be a really literate patient, very learned patient, will he really have the capacity to give consent? I don't see Ganga sir here, and I really wanted to pose this question to Dr. Ganga Khedkar. It should be just providing the information, that is all. You provide information to the patient. But friends, as the law exists today, you have to take consent. You have to take informed consent. What is the importance of consent? Very important. And two aspects. The first one, nearly 2/3 of the cases that are decided in India, or rather filed in India, They pertain either to improper consent or improper documentation. So consent is a big issue in India, especially in matters reaching court. Second, a very critical patient may come to you. And you may perform the most impossible of the surgeries. And the results would be fabulous, great. But at the end of all this, if you have not taken consent, you are negligent in the eyes of law. You will have to pay compensation under the Consumer Act, under the civil laws. And if the patient wants, it's tough, but yes, he can sue you criminally also. This is the importance of consent. One wrong notion, let me clear it. Very thin dividing line, and that is why I would want all of you to understand that. A patient's consent has nothing to do with your diagnosis, your line of treatment. Many doctors carry this wrong notion. I have taken consent, patient has consented to this, now I can go on with what I have thought. Sorry. Your diagnosis, your line of treatment, that has to stand on your own discretion, your own decisions. And if they are wrong, you are negligent in the eyes of law. A case from Chhattisgarh. Very interesting. Only to illustrate the difference between what I am saying. A 19-year-old boy, he wanted to join films. But he was carrying that wrong perception that no, I am not tall. If I can get 2 inches of height, I'll be the next Amitabh Bachchan of Hindi films. That young boy approaches an orthopedic surgeon. And the orthopedic surgeon says, yes, I can increase your height at least by 1.5 inches. There is a Russian technique by which I'll break one of your bones. And within 3 months, you will gain that height. The boy says, yes, that is what I want. But the doctor knew this is not something normal. He took a very elaborate consent. And in the consent form, he did write that the boy wants to join films. That is why the boy has come to me. And I'm going to perform this surgery to increase his height. Surgery performed. When the boy was there in the hospital, his mother came to see him, and then she reasoned out whatever you are doing is foolishness. Boy was convinced, went back home, changed his decision to break the other feet. Unfortunately for the orthopedic surgeon, the surgery was completely successful. So now, the patient had one of his legs 2 inches taller than the other one. And he sued this orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon said in court, what wrong have I done? It is the patient who came in my clinic. It is the patient who wanted to join films. I had no role to play. I have performed a surgery which is 100% successful. The court said, you are a doctor. He is not a doctor. This Russian technique is meant to used in the most complicated fractures, not to increase height, doctor. Merely because the patient has given consent, you cannot justify your action. He was held negligent. Now, as far as the theme that we are going to debate today, mandatory consent, you all know, before screening a patient for HIV, mandatory consent has to be taken. 1.5 months back, I was on the other side saying that no, consent should not be taken. In a country like India, an underdeveloped country like India, wasting even a single naya paisa on universal precautions is culpable. It's criminal wastage of money. But thanks to Dr. Gilada and Dr. Ganga Khedkar, They both were there in the National Convention on Medicine and Law. They debated on this topic, and today I'm convinced to a certain extent that no, consent should be taken. For screening helps the patient, at least in a country like India. Doctors are then forced to really counsel the patient, inform him of other aspects also of the treatment. But anyway, let this inference, this perception of what I carry not come in debate. Before I close, one take-home message for all doctors. A patient may come to you. He may not give consent for screening. He may not give consent for testing. You have a right in law, unfettered right. And that right is to refuse treating that patient, to refuse accepting that patient. I am not suggesting this is what you should do, but this is the law. You have an unfettered right not to accept a patient. That is all. Thanks for hearing me patiently. Not developed the way it has developed in the Western countries. In the Western countries, there is a concept known as the concept of Gillick child. Now, this means a child who may not have attained the age of majority, but still has the power. He can comprehend what is right, what is wrong for him. Unfortunately, till date in India, we don't have any such reported cases. We still are in the gray zone. But my advice would be that if the patient is between 12 and 18 years of age, please take consent of both the patient as well as the guardian or the parent who has come with the patient. And a very sound legal reason. Under the laws of India, the civil laws, a person becomes an adult at the age of 18 years. But under the criminal laws of India, a child of 12 years can give consent. So to protect you from both the civil consequences as well as the criminal consequences, it would be better if you take consent of both the child or rather a 12-year, 13-year-old patient as well as the guardian and or parent who are there with him.
Thank you, Dr. Mahendra Kumar.
I have two queries.
Yes.
Please. In HIV positive patient, it is told that you should not disclose the patient is HIV positive to many relatives. Maybe in one of the relatives you can disclose. If patient is critical.
Now,
so
I would like to, shall we take these points and inputs after the debate far and against is over? Because Dr. Mahendra Kumar has given an insight into what is the legality of it. So we'll take input from the audience after the debate sets in. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mahendra Kumar. Now,
Sir,
quickly.
Assent. I would like to add about this.
Yes.
Between 12 to 18, it is assent rather than consent. So assent, one can give assent. Suppose one child is there, 15 years old, he can give assent about the, suppose blood testing. But when there is a issue of legal issue likely in future, then only the consent of the guardians or parents should be taken. That is my suggestion.
Okay. The recent bill has given a provision 12 to 18 years old adolescents given can become care providers for other HIV positive family members and affected other children. As of now, there are still some gray zone areas. We will try to get these during the interaction time later. Now we'll quickly have the debate comments. We'll just have 5 minutes presentation from 2 speakers who will speak for and 2 speakers who will speak against. After that, we'll have about 8 or 10 minutes of interaction from the audience. I'll quickly call upon Dr. Prakash Bora, who would talk for should we make HIV testing mandatory in India. Dr.
Now that we decide about this burning issue, and we feel that we must, excuse me, yeah, we must make testing more accessible and mandatory. So if you go through these global statistics, there are 17 million people who are accessing antiretroviral therapy. But these 17 million people are out of 36.7 million people globally living with HIV. So what I want to say is that facts don't cease to exist because we neglect them. In 2013, there were 36% adults and 30% of the children who were eligible for ART, and those only have received the treatment. So the rest of them have not received the treatment. In 2014, 13% of the people living with HIV were thought to be aware, are thought to be aware of their status. So the rest of them were not aware of the status. So if you consider these statistics of India, there are 43% adults who are on antiretroviral treatment. And if you consider the public health policy, which is now their 90-90-90 treatment target, so by 2020, if we want that 90% of the people living with HIV should know their HIV status, if we want that they should know their positive status and they should access the treatment, and those 90% of the receiving treatment should have suppressed viral loads. If we have that goal, we need to have a compulsory testing. And there is a changed scenario. Earlier, the consent was needed because there was discrimination, there was stigma, but now there is acceptance, there is reduced discrimination, there is an affordable therapy with increased efficiency, and there is legal support system also available. And PLHA are leading good quality life for many years. So in this changed scenario, again there are many clinical situations where we need to do those testing, like in preoperative cases, in ANC cases, in pyrexia of unknown origin, in PrEP and PrEP, STDs, in all those things we need to have this testing. So the advantage of mandatory compulsory testing is early diagnosis. If we are able to do early diagnosis, we will be able to do early treatment. And if we are able to do early treatment, we will be able to prevent the further transmission. And it is going to be cost effective in the long run. And it can be definitely linked to the main healthcare system, and it will also help us in prevention of spread of TB in community. So my suggestion is like, you should treat it like any other viral diseases. For hepatitis B, we don't take consent. For hepatitis C, we don't take consent. So why should we take consent for HIV? That is one. Link with the mainstream healthcare. And there is another option is that you can have a universal testing and an intensified testing for high risk groups or the target intervention groups. So before I end, I would like the people to listen to these words of wisdom, that let what happened to us not happen to you or anybody. Together we must succeed for the sake of humanity, and we cannot afford to fail. So this was Mr. Mukumbi from Uganda in 1992. And Kofi Annan in 2005 said that we can make the difference, we can prevent new infections, we can improve quality of care and treatment, and time to act is now. So I would like my opposition party to listen to these words of wisdom, and still if you don't decide, if we do not go for it, then probably we are denying the reality, and there is a dichotomy, there is a paradoxic with the public health policies, and we will be depriving undiagnosed the opportunity to get diagnosed and treated early, and delay will cause more damage in terms of life. That's all.
Dr. Bora. Now, Dr. Bora has made his stance very clear that since we have come of age over the last few years of the epidemic, so it is time we must really go in for mandatory testing. Now, I'd like to have a quick rejoinder from Dr. Rajiv Jarjani, how you're going to contradict Dr. Bora's stance. Right.
Well, quick rebuttal. Two things. What Advocate Bajpai said to begin with is that there is a law. Now, I'm in a double-bind situation that if I don't follow the law, I'm liable. And two, that my dear friend here is saying that, look, we have overcome, we are enlightened, and we can take decision for anybody to do anything. Because I personally very strongly believe that right or wrong or good or bad is always a retrospective analysis. It is necessary that we should understand very clearly that the purpose of giving the informed consent is to give information, number one. But what happens if you are giving information in, most of the practice which you see, that person is signing blindly to the, in what we call blanket consent. And that is where the informed consent is not given. It is very specifically for HIV, if we are going to make, there are two issues. That what Mr. Bajpai said, that the law is drafted by lawyers, and I'm sure all of you have seen some of the legal languages. It is proposed as a bill, it goes to politicians. Those who don't understand that language, I'm sorry. And then, if at all it becomes a law, it will be given to the implementing agencies, and those agencies have different viewpoints about the whole issue because they don't understand the law, nor they understand politics. The question here is very focused, that the purpose of law is to see that it is not misused. Any behavior which is by any person is not with the purpose of harming that individual or causing any kind of harm. Now, it is a presumptuous statement that I can take a decision for a person that what is good for him. The person may be, we have been in the entire conference, there was only one mention of the psychological aspects of personally being a psychiatrist. It is a lack which we understand, that what happens to people who cannot give consent in terms of their incapacity or incoherence. What if in fact, in the morning also there was another point which was taken, which was related to adherence, that if I don't treat, there is no issue of adherence. It's a very interesting concept. But then it is the dichotomy which is created, which results into more creating mess. And therefore, it is necessary for us to understand that as a civil person, civilized society, and I don't think as yet that there are enough number of doctors who understand and can treat HIV as a whole spectrum of disorder which pervades to entire medical community. And for that purpose, it is better to be safe rather than to be sorry. If there is a law that consent is required, between age 12 and 18, it is a tricky situation, and what Mr. Bajpai said is appropriate, that it is necessary that it is the consent should be taken by both. And I appreciate that part, and I do not agree with Dr. Bora's concept that I can decide for, A, B, C, D. Only point which I feel that you should also, Mr. Bajpai, comment on the fundamental rights and give some perspective to the consent. Whether is it a fundamental right? Yes or no? Thank you very much.
Am I audible? Thank you, Dr. Jajani. I think you said the tone right, that it boils down to the fundamental right of every human being, whether consent, the proper informed consent is a right or not. Now we'll again come back to the argument in favor of mandatory testing. I request Dr. Milind Brushundi to come and make his stance known to the audience, right? Audience, you may give your inputs and comments at the end of the discussion. Be very focused, very specific. Do not give illustrations about any specific cases in your practice. Be very specific to the point. Right. Dr. Milind, you're ready.
Thank you. Yes, I'm wrong. I'm not only side of mandatory testing and on the side of yes, it is not required. But we should know that why I am wrong. Not only me, but Dr. Ruben Granish from the WHO also is wrong. Whatever he has given regarding the mathematical model published in 2009 regarding the same, I think he must be wrong. I am also wrong because I don't want 1990. I don't want 1990. Yes, I am wrong because mandatory testing is not possible. So I am wrong. I don't want 1990. I have seen the global scenario in 2015. I don't want this also. I don't want to control the deaths. I don't want to control the new infections. And that's why I am wrong. I am wrong because I know that 21% are unaware of the infection and they are accounting for 54% of the new infections. I don't want to control these also. 79% are aware of the infection, but they might not be treated. So again, I am wrong because I don't want to control these infections. I am again wrong because just see 15 to 24 years of age group, the girls, they are getting positive, and you just see in this cartoon what is the percentage. I don't want to control these also, that's why I am wrong. But yes, there are certain countries, they are adopting for it. A small country, universal access to HIV testing and counseling, they have come up with the programs. Leave no mosotho out, every life counts. Fiji Savetta from Brazil, 30% of the individuals in the Brazilians were tested from you got to know. That's the campaign. But the fact is, no one can argue that HIV testing is a bad thing. Knowing one's status allows a person to access treatment earlier, change risky behaviors, or rest assured that he or she is indeed HIV negative. The fact is, as the mandatory HIV testing, no signed consent from the patient will be required. The general consent for the medical care will be considered sufficient to encompass the consent of the HIV testing. And this has gotten a bad reputation in recent years from human rights activists like my friend Dr. Jitarani, who argue for a personal right to choose to know whether or not they are HIV. But here is a question of freedom of choice versus right to live. You are having a choice, do HIV testing or not, but those who are dying, they have right to live, why they are not tested. They are going to ask you why I am not tested. So there is a question, a fundamental right is right to live rather than freedom of choice. And this is going to give a great info as well as policy planning. We don't know. There are largest barriers to HIV research is the number of patients in developing countries as well as developed world. We don't know the statistics, and we unnecessarily pour the money into the awareness programs where they are not required, and in adolescent only 0.5% of the money is going where we don't know exactly what is the population. By requiring people to be tested for HIV, the public health community would gain valuable info on how many people are infected and what groups are most at risk significantly leading to the preventive programs. What the Bill Clinton says, we can save people's lives and we can reduce the stigma. There is no way we are going to reduce the spread of this epidemic without more testing, because 90% of the people who are HIV positive, they don't know that they are positive. And yes, there is an answer to the human rights activists. We are talking of a lot of things like confidentiality. You all know that there are a lot of breaches of confidentiality, even if you talk of confidentiality. A valid concern is a stigma surrounding the HIV in developing world involves testing itself. People are reluctant to be tested because they are associated HIV testing with promiscuous behavior, homosexuality and drug usage. But by requiring everyone to be tested, the stigma associated with this walking into the HIV testing is going to go down. If everybody is tested, there is no question of stigma. Of course, this requires time and a decision by people to be open for their status, but it is a potential to show that everyone and anyone can contract HIV, and that good things like treatment, support groups, advocacy efforts are there. Benefits are clear and non-debatable. Yes, but I agree that implementation is a problem, infrastructure, financial, human resources, human rights group, and yes, the policy standpoint. But it has to be in stepwise manner. Pregnant mothers, that is the first group, we have to focus much more because we know that coverage is not there. Still, there are positive influences definitely there. Second, opt-out testing. And the third one, maybe in the annual checkups, creative ways to bring opt-out to the mobile clinic strategy. So it has to be a stepwise implementation. I don't want that it should be a first and foremost, go for directly mandatory testing. Compulsory HIV testing is a basic topic, but that doesn't mean that the discussion should be in there. We should continue to find ways to make as many as possible aware of their HIV status in hopes of slowing the spread of HIV epidemic. Human rights may be limited when this is in the public interest, but these measures must be necessary to achieve a specific objective. In this case, it would mean that the mandatory HIV testing is necessary to eliminate HIV, and there is no other way to achieve this. Know your status. Leave no mosquito out. That was what Lesotho has given us.
When everybody would not do it, it ended up that everybody blamed somebody when actually nobody accused anybody. That is the situation going in our country. We are not able to take any intervention. That this is the time in 2016, mandatory testing is not needed, informed consent is not needed, the diseases does not have that stigma. In last so many years, we have not seen anything going dialogue. So many ground reality is pre-informed, without consent. Everybody is doing HIV testing pre-operatively, even our corporate hospitals are doing. But why we are making it abiding to law, we are unnecessarily spending time and money for such informed consent. Thank you very much.
Dr. Harsh, because he agreed to our viewpoint just by our argument for 5 minutes. And as far as Dr. Jairajan is concerned, he says that law is there and we must follow the law. Yes, we do agree, but law can be changed. And it is high time that we must advocate for that. And there is already a bill there. So now I think we need to do that. And whether consent is not required, but that doesn't mean that counseling is not required. We will do counseling, but consent is not required. Testing can be mandatory. And there is already, implied consent for all other diseases. So similarly, it can be there. And it is going to be cost effective, definitely.
Yeah, Dr. Jayajani, please.
I've got 2 points to mention. I'm sure if my esteemed colleagues have said that we can do testing for all, in that case, what happens to people who are HIV negative? And that would create a social dichotomy of two groups of people, those who are infected and those who are not infected. Now, if that happens, then certainly the stigma and discrimination which we are thinking that we have been successfully able to eliminate, no, it's not going to happen. Even after 50 years of treatment of Hansen's disorder, it still is considered as stigmatic. Second point which I want to make is that I'm sure those who have worked in the field of HIV disease have heard about the Cuban experiment. Is there anybody who has not heard? The Cuban experiment was something which was what my esteemed colleagues have mentioned. And those who are not infected, because they found that the facility and treatment which is provided is far superior than those who are not infected, homeless and unemployed people. Trust me, it resulted into a severe catastrophe where people started injecting HIV-infected blood to get to stay in those facilities. I rest my case.
Right. Now, quickly, Dr. Milind. Yes.
Dr. Jijarani, sir, there are two groups in the world, one with diabetes, another without diabetes, one with syphilis, another without syphilis. Everybody is fighting. And the same thing is going to happen, I think, in HIV also. Okay.
Yeah, same. I agree with what Dr. Milind says.
sex and death, these are the two monsters which created the fear of epidemic. But those which are laws and it have to be followed.
Now, all opinions given. Now quickly, we'll have some quick inputs from the audience. Now remember, I think we'll just allocate about 5 minutes for the inputs and the comments from the audience. After that, the entire evening is there. Since there's no cocktail, all of us will be in very sane levels so that we can always continue and extend this fight during the dinner time. Yes.
Sir, myself, Dr. Dave, medical legal expert. There are three issues I would like to tell you. The informed consent is different thing, consent is different thing, and counseling is different thing. So what we are discussing, mandatory counseling, mandatory consent, that is not, according to me, it is not required. Second thing, informed consent is also not required. Only consent is required for testing. And if you remove the counseling, it will increase the chance of testing. And it will help our society. That is my, and last thing, doctor has not protected themselves. There are the certain conditions. Doctor failed to protect their rights. There are conditions when patient comes with HIV positive suspected. It should be right of the doctor treating to know the status of the patient, to have prevention. That is my view, personal view, because it is required. And those people who are doing corporate hospital and this without consent, that is unethical and illegal.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Quick. Once.
Rebut. Sir, I need to correct you. Law is there in place. There are guidelines which say that for HIV, mandatory HIV screening, mandatory consent has to be taken. Without that, you cannot screen the patient. One. Number two, there is a reported case of the National Consumer Commission where a hospital has been held negligent simply because a person was tested for HIV without taking consent.
Yes, that's exactly what he's quoting from his experience. Now quick. Right.
Sir, in my opinion, as we all have accepted that HIV can affect all, not only the adolescent or only CSW. So in that situation, why not to go ahead with proper informing, explanation to the patient, informing and then taking the consent? That goes the more, even as human right, even as a sensible doctor, that goes the step-by-step step method. Secondly, as we all have been saying, HIV is no more a death sentence, but a chronically manageable disease. So why we are making a panic of testing and treating all without informing anyone? So again, we are entering into a domain of panic kind of situation. That is what I feel. And thirdly, as our friend, lawyer sir had mentioned, that if the person is not giving consent, the doctor has right to deny for the treatment. So that also gives us a kind of our own mental peace that if the person is not ready to give his consent for testing, then we don't need to enter into that case. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Glory.
I have two issues. Yeah. One is we are now in the era of test and treat. In India, all those who are diagnosed positive itself don't have access to treatment. You do mandatory testing, you get another whole bunch of people who are HIV positive, and they have no access to treatment, there's no backup. The second issue is with women. We live in a male-dominated society in India. And 40.5% of all infections today are in women. And if women get HIV positive, their condition is just going to be worse. So I think we should consider mandatory testing as not, and it's not doable. I think unless we have the backup, everything in place, public health system is working, functioning excellently, everything is going top guns, then we can look at something like this in a very, very conciliatory, communicative kind of way. But mandatory testing at this point in time, I would say no.
We're still not prepared. That's exactly what you say, right? Yes.
Excuse me, sir. Myself had been treating HIV cases for the last 15 years. To my surprise, so many innocent people got infected because of not aware stage now. So mandated testing is a mandate, is definite, a must to protect the innocent people, like young girls getting married. Woman is the victim in this country. Now still she is the victim here. So the accessibility, the transmission to the woman is more than to the men. So to protect the woman who are in the important person in the life of anybody should be protected, and mandated testing is a mandatory, should be done. Definitely should be done without taking any consent. Yeah. And we can amend the law to make it a premarital consent before marriage. A person should be screened whether he or she is positive or not. So I know, I have seen many young people getting frustrated. They themselves are committing suicide also because of no testing, because not allowed to be tested.
I understand. You're making a new point made very clear that premarital testing.
Definitely,
but that will
sir.
invite one whole debate, one other occasion. I think point well taken. Now I'll ask Dr. Gilada to give his input, please. Right.
Just one point for my colleague from Bhavnagar. What he says that we have a right as a doctor to ask patients to be tested, and without that we should not entertain them. I think this is wrong, even though I'm a doctor. No, but basically it means that. The moment you say that, the patient will start demanding, doctor, before touching me, before doing any surgery, before procedure, he should also disclose his HIV status. And this will be a very wrong precedent. And secondly, unless and until we have a stigma discrimination thing in place to be taken care of, compulsory testing will lead to compulsory or mandatory stigma and discrimination. Because in our country, stigma and discrimination is not for HIV per se, not for death per se. It is because of HIV is linked with sex. And it is a carpet culture, above the carpet clean, below the carpet dirt. So that will not go away for maybe next 100 years or so. So we cannot have compulsory testing or mandatory testing in our country currently.
Yes. Anything else? Okay. I'll just take a minute as a moderator, I think, just to sum up the whole debate. India, we are a billion population. And we know for certain, even after 3 decades into the epidemic, when the World AIDS Day slogan mentions about zeroing down on infections, it also mentioned zero down on AIDS discrimination, which indicates stigma and discrimination continue to stare at us. Though it is not resource dependent, though it is not dependent on any medications, it's still largely and widely prevalent across the world. And we have a small percentage, 0.26 million. Now, keeping that in mind, we need to really dwell on how are we going to get this mandatory test in place. Considering the fact that we have specific populations, key populations like sex workers, MSMs, ANC, IV drug users, STD, other STD and hepatitis B positive, those who have got tuberculosis, in these populations, maybe we can consider the possibility of mandatory testing. But the general population, are we really prepared? I think it is something which we need to really dwell on. I am sure we'll have many things to deliberate and discuss even after this debate gets over. Now, I thank my fellow panelists for making this hour very interesting, exciting, and very participatory. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, speakers. I would like to request the Chairperson to felicitate our speakers. I request Dr.
Thank you all the speakers and the chairperson for the interesting debate. We move on to the next session. I'd like to invite our chairperson, Dr.